Good afternoon and welcome to episode 2 of Start the Conversation. Today we will be discussing Canadian headlines. First off, I'd like to say a disclaimer that we are going to be discussing some sensitive nature topics today, so if you have young children in the room, you might want to consider that before letting them sit and view the episode today with you. Secondly, I would like to state that I am in no shape, way, or form any sort of expert, and any opinions or views that I express today are directly related to my experience as a survivor. Well, thank you very much to everybody who joined in last week. We had an outstanding response to our first episode, and I want to say thank you to everybody for viewing in and for your support. It was absolutely amazing and overwhelming. So today I'd like to discuss some things that have been going on in our Canadian headlines over the course of the last year. I have to admit, doing the research, looking into some of the different Canadian headlines, I was quite taken aback with the things that are going on in our country right now. As much as we're pushing forward, trying to open up the conversation to talk about sexual abuse and sexual assault, there's so many things going on out in our justice system, in our legal system, as well as in our political system that is impacting survivors in relation to coming forward and being believed. So I'd like to discuss a few of these articles here today. First one I'd like to talk about is in regards to the Halifax cabbie incident. A Halifax judge acquitted a cab driver of sexually assaulting a female passenger whom was found by the police partially naked and unconscious in the cab. The judge on the case said that a person is incapable of consent if they're unconscious or so intoxicated that they're unable to understand or perceive their situation. And the judge can be quoted as saying, so clearly a drunk cannot consent, or a drunk can consent. I have to admit, when I read this, I was quite disgusted. I couldn't believe that consent, that this judge could believe that a drunk could consent. I was quite disgusted. I'd like to describe to Judge Linehan what the definition of consent is according to the Webster's Dictionary. It is to give permission for something to happen. If somebody is unconscious, how do they give permission for something to happen? We are taught that when we go out at night, drinking and driving, that in order not to do that, it's safe to catch a cab. That you should take a cab home so you get home and arrive safe and you're there with a sober driver. But who would have ever thought, as a single woman, I go out for a girls' night out with my friends, and I jump in a cab to come home so I'm not drinking and driving. And I would have never think in a million years that there's a possibility I could be sexually assaulted on that ride home. I'm sure there's hundreds, thousands of women across Canada that would never think that would happen either. But the truth be told, it has been happening. I have to say to Judge Linehan, shame on you. Shame on you, my son, for putting that kind of message out there. Putting that kind of message out there to men and women all across Canada that it's okay if the person is unconscious or if they're drunk. Shame on you. There's been a lot of public controversy that's arose over this verdict, actually causing the Chief Justice to convene a review committee of the actual court case that happened and the charges to see if they should be appealed or changed. The funny thing is this has even happened right here in Edmonton. Believe it or not, right here in our backyard. And I'd actually like to read an article with you today in regards to what happened to one of the cases here in Edmonton. There's been a new sexual assault trial ordered on grounds Edmonton judge relied on myths and stereotypes. This article is by Nola Keeler from CBC News, and it was posted on July 19th of 2017. An Edmonton area man found not guilty earlier this year of sexually assaulting his stepdaughter will stand trial again, following a decision by the Alberta Court of Appeals Wednesday. In a split decision, the 3-judge panel ordered a new trial after finding the original judge relied on myths and stereotypes in the sexual behavior of sexual assault, or in the behavior of sexual assault victims. A publication ban prevents naming either the stepdaughter, now an adult, or her 55-year-old stepfather. During the trial in February of 2016, the stepdaughter told Justice Terry Clarkson her stepfather sexually assaulted her on a regular basis for 6 years, beginning when she was in grade 4. At At trial, Clarkson said he had doubts about the stepdaughter's allegations after she described her relationship with the stepfather as okay, I guess. She had also told police that the two of them kind of got along. In finding the stepfather not guilty, Clarkson said he would have expected some evidence that the stepdaughter was trying to avoid the stepfather. As a matter of logic and common sense, one would expect that a victim of the sexual abuse would demonstrate behaviors consistent with that abuse, or at least some change of behavior, such as avoiding the perpetrator. This was quoted as the judge saying. Alberta highest court said Clarkson clearly made a mistake in law when he relied on an impressionable stereotype or myth about the behavior of sexual assault victims in assessing the stepdaughter's credibility. This appeal represents an example of how deeply ingrained and seductive these myths and stereotypes can be. An appeal court said in its written decision, to suggest that stereotypical thinking is merely logic or common sense is a license for it to continue unmasked and unabated. Justice Frank Slater dissented with his two colleagues. Trial judges are entitled to rely on logic and common sense, so as long as inferences are not based on stereotypical thinking. I have to say, it's quite alarming to see our judges making these rash decisions like this, making decisions that are putting things back in a negative light on the survivor. And through a lot of the public controversy this year, actually, Rona Ambrose introduced a bill called C-337. And what this bill would do is it would impose mandatory training before candidates are considered for federally appointed court positions. This bill has caused a wide range of reactions from the Judicial Department as well as all political angles of Canada. But is it only judges that need special training? I think it's unfair for us to say that they're the only ones who do. Should not all public servants receive this training? Lawyers, judges, police, firefighters, EMTs, social workers, teachers, school counselors, administrative staff that work in the front end of a school. Anybody who's dealing or working with children should be receiving this type of training. We could all benefit from learning a little bit more about how to recognize and prevent child sexual abuse or assault. Little Warriors actually offers a workshop called Prevent It, which educates adults to take actions through gaining knowledge to help prevent and respond to child abuse. And they do this through two different ways. You can either, one, you can attend a workshop in your local community, which is an in-person workshop, or if you want, you can also do an online workshop, which will take you approximately about 90 minutes, and it can be done from the comfort of your home. For more information on these workshops, please go to www.littlewarriors.ca/prevention/workshop. All links will be listed in the comment section below today's episode after the show. So, a lot to get to today. I'd like to talk about our next article that actually comes from all the way from Newfoundland. And this article, I have to admit, when it came across my social media feeds and came across in the newspapers, I was very disheartened to read this. I could not help but relate to what this girl had to endure, and her story is truly heartbreaking. So I'd like to read you that article today. And it's titled, System Failed, 12-year-old Newfoundland Girl Impregnated by Stepfather. This was written on August 23rd, published by Keith Doucette of the Canadian Press. A report released Wednesday found Newfoundland and Labrador's child protection system responded inadequately to her case and missed opportunities to intervene. It took 2 more years and a second abortion before the girl told authorities in another province about the abuse. It was really shocking, and it was saddening to see that this could happen to this little girl of 12 years old, said Jacqueline Lake Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh says questions weren't asked, risks weren't assessed, and consents were not appropriately obtained when the girl sought and ultimately obtained an abortion after saying she had become pregnant by having consensual sex with her teenage boyfriend. She received inadequate screening and assessments, which potentially enabled the sexual abuse of the child to continue, Kavanaugh wrote. Had appropriate measures been taken when this child presented to terminate her pregnancy, or when child protection concerns were reported, the abuse may potentially have been detected or stopped. The report said the family lived in Newfoundland and Labrador for about 5 months before moving to another province, where the girl told authorities 2 years later that she had been repeatedly sexually assaulted by her stepfather over a period of 26 months, resulting in not 1 but 2 abortions. The stepfather pled guilty in the case and to other offenses, including sexual assault on other individuals, and was sentenced to 16 years in prison. The report says that shortly after arriving in Newfoundland and Labrador, the stepfather took the girl to a Planned Parenthood medical clinic seeking an abortion. The man claimed to be the girl's biological father, even though he wasn't. The girl's mother lived outside the province and wasn't involved. The report says although the girl said she had consensual sex with her boyfriend, questions weren't asked about his age, and the stepfather's guardianship status was never verified. The child was referred to the Eastern Health Authority for an abortion where, again, age-appropriate screening and counseling service weren't offered. The surgery was performed despite 2 sections of the consent being incomplete, one of which included the legal capacity of the stepfather to sign the consent. The child was discharged from the hospital with the stepfather and no further follow-up. The report says officials with the Department of Children, Seniors and Social Development, CSSD, became involved a month later after multiple protection referrals, including one that alleged a stepfather had physically abused the 12-year-old and one of her siblings. Although the CSSD conducted some follow-up interviews, the child's grandmother and stepfather eventually became uncooperative, with the stepfather claiming harassment and the grandmother refusing to allow the children to be interviewed. Essentially, she was a little girl going through an adult healthcare system, and the responses really hadn't set up and tailored to the needs of the child. There should be a red flag that should go up when a 12-year-old comes in pregnant. I couldn't agree more. Reading this article, there's so many things in it that went wrong in our system. How a 12-year-old could end up going for not 1 but 2 abortions and no intervention, no discussion with her in regards to it. When did it become normal for a 12-year-old to show up in a Planned Parenthood pregnant and us not to intervene and try to make sure that that child is safe and that this wasn't something more than consensual sex? The other part that really, I have to say, gets under my skin is how does a procedure as serious as an abortion get performed without confirmation of the consent being signed by what at the time looked like her legal guardian? How is that not checked before that procedure is started? That baffles me. In our Canadian healthcare system, with our privacy law, with the Health Information Act, that this procedure went forward without a consent being signed is absolutely just disgraceful. Absolutely disgraceful. It just does not make sense to me. Not at all. And if you're out there today listening to the 12-year-old girl from Newfoundland, you're not alone, my dear. I'm sorry for everything that you've had to endure. I'm sorry that our system wasn't there to protect you better. And I'm sorry that you're going through all the stages healing related to what happened to you. But I want you to know you're not alone, and I believe you. There's hundreds of us, thousands of us all across Canada that believe you and stand beside you. And I promise it may not seem like it today, may not seem like it tomorrow, but it will get better, and you will make it through. So keep your chin up, my girl, because we're all standing right here with you. It's actually quite a lot to absorb, some of these articles, I must say. The third article that I'd like to speak about is actually something of a little bit more of a lighter topic. I would like to talk about BACA. And for all of you out there wondering what BACA is, BACA stands for Bikers Against Child Abuse. They are an amazing organization that is going out of their way to go above and beyond for children who have been abused. So I'd like to read you an amazing article written about them that was just actually written here on September 17th, and it was published in the Mornville News, a town I hold very near and dear to my heart as I grew up out there when I was young. And the article is by Stephen Defoe. A half-dozen bikers dressed in leather, covered in tattoos, and looking a little more than intimidating, mixed recently with Zumba instructors, basketball coaches, and even Girl Guide leaders. Though the bikers might look like they don't belong at an event geared for children and families, the members of the Edmonton Charter of Bikers Against Child Abuse, BACA, were a welcome addition. BACA, who have chapters around the world, exist to create a safer environment for abused children by helping them not to feel afraid of the world around them. BACA members have escorted children to court and other appointments and even stood vigil outside the child's home to assure them that they're safe. The organization began in Utah 21 years ago and has been in Canada for 5 or 6 years now. The Edmonton chapter began 4 years ago. Members go through a very extensive background check system, including criminal record checks and vulnerable sector checks. The international organization has a central contact person within each of its chapters who receives calls from individuals and referring agencies. The chapters work with the family to have members meet the child and give them a vest with a patch sewn on the back as well as other gifts. The child is provided contact information for 2 nearby BACA members that they can call whenever they feel scared. Members do not go to the child's house alone or without the knowledge or permission of the parents. The Edmonton chapter president goes by the name Boomer. For security reasons, BACA members do not offer their real names. Boomer said despite the good work the organization does, they do make enemies. He uses the example of a family of a perpetrator who was sent to jail that feels BACA had something to do with the incarceration. He is quoted as saying, "We will escort a child. When they become a BACA child and they have to go to court, we will escort them into court," Boomer explained. "But we are not telling them what to say. We are not influencing them at all. We are just there, almost as security, to make them feel safe." The organization goal is to empower children so they are not afraid of the world around them. Sometimes that involves BACA paying for counseling for the child if the family cannot afford it. Boomer is critical of the government for dropping the ball on helping abused children. They will give a child 3 counseling sessions, maybe 4, and say, "Here you go." That doesn't do anything. It takes 3 or 4 counseling sessions to just establish a relationship with the child, and then the government cuts them off. That's just how our system works. BACA fundraises to help fill the void, turning 100% of the proceeds over to the work they do. Not a single member, right up to the highest ranking BACA member on the planet, does not draw a dime out of the organization. The money is for the kids. BACA has paid for counseling in the form of sitting in the office. They paid for horseback riding lessons because that is considered a form of therapy. They've paid for boxing lessons for one of the kids because it was helping with them to deal with their aggression. Therapy is a broad word that means a lot of things. Looking Out for Children has included connecting with other agencies, including Little Warriors and the Be Brave Ranch, offering awareness services they offer. We're the ones who will get up at 3 in the morning if a child calls, get out of bed, and go to that child's house and stand there. It could be the middle of the winter. If it's what the child needs to go back to sleep, then that's what we will do. We say it's 24/7 and it's 365, and it is. I'm sorry, but a paragraph every time I read this article chokes me up. Boomer said those wanting to help the organization can do the best by spreading awareness and donating financially to the cause. If you know a child who can benefit from their help, they are there. I have to say to Becca, I wish you had been around 25 years ago when I was a child, when the truth came out about everything. I had to go to court numerous times, and I had an amazing support system, an amazing family I was staying with at the time that came with me. So I had a small group of people that came with me, so I wasn't alone. But looking back and seeing the work that you're doing and hearing about it, it touches my heart. It's the message of the work that you've done reaches all the way down to that little girl inside of me that is still there. That part of me that still sometimes gets scared. Knowing that there is people like you out there makes me sleep better at night. And I just have to say thank you. What you guys are doing from a survivor's perspective is amazing. And every time I read your article, I can't help it. I get choked up. I'm very touched by what you're doing. So thank you. Well, I have one more topic I'd like to discuss with you all today. And it's a little something for you to think about, a little takeaway for you to take away from today's episode. I wonder how many of you out there know what the National Sex Offender Registry is. Well, what it is, the registry, which was formed in 2001, contains information on individuals that have been convicted of a sexual offense. Unfortunately, this system was not brought into place until 2004. Since 2011, all convicted sex offenders have automatically been included on the registry. But I have a question out there to all my viewers. I want to tell you a little something about the state's registry. The state's registry is publicly searchable, meaning if you wanted to know if there was sex offenders and pedophiles living on your block, living in your neighborhood or down the street, you could go online and you could find that out. Canada, unfortunately, ours is not designed for citizen consumption. So that's the question I want to throw out to everybody out there today. As a parent, as a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, a brother or sister, a mother or father, what are your views? What do you think? Do you think the Canadian system should be publicly accessible and searchable just like the United States one is? I would be really intrigued to hear your comments and your views. Please leave them in the comments section below, and we will definitely respond to all of them. I have to say, in my opinion, as a mother of 2 beautiful daughters and 1 amazing son, I'd want to know. I'd want to know if the man that lives next door or down the street is a pedophile. I'd want to know so I could keep my children safe and so I could keep myself safe. So please let me know what you think. And lastly, I would like to send a message out to survivors. I want you to know that no matter what you see in the news headlines, across social media, even on the news or the TV, that there are a lot of organizations and people out there willing to help if you need our help. If you are wanting to come forward, wanting to go to the authorities, wanting to tell your story, or just wanting someone to talk to. It's very important that you know that you're not alone and that you are believed. So no matter what you're seeing in the headlines, know that for as many bad headlines as there is, there's a lot of really good stories of the proper things happening through the legal channels. We just don't hear about them as much. So please don't let what you see across media stop you or make you think that you won't be heard. Because society is changing, and we hear you, we believe you, and we're here for you. Thank you for joining me today. We will see you again in 2 weeks' time, which we will be doing an on-site, on-location special guest episode. More information about that will come out later this week. So until then, everybody, thanks for joining in today. And please don't forget to start the conversation.